I'm Amara, I'm 35, and since I was 8, my mother applied a cream for the spots. Twice a day, every day, for 20 years. She told me it was dermatological treatment, that my skin had pigmentation problems, that everyone in the family used it. At 28, a dermatologist in another country told me the truth. It wasn't spot cream. It was hydroquinone at 40%, mixed with corticosteroids and mercury, an illegal formula that destroys melanin, that causes cancer, that leaves permanent scars. My skin, originally dark, was now a tone my mother called acceptable, but worse than the cream, my mother had changed my name. On my original birth certificate, which she never showed me, I was Nia Akafur, daughter of a Nigerian man she never mentioned. She renamed me Amara Blanco. A name she invented that sounded European, that didn't reveal my origin. And when I confronted her with the certificate, with the cream, with the photograph of my biological father that she had hidden, she said, "I saved you. With your skin and your name, you would have been a dark woman from the street. Now you're a professional, acceptable." She died 2 years later. I didn't go to her funeral, but I went to the post office where she had a box. And I found letters, 40 years of letters, from my father, from Nigeria, looking for me. "Nia, my daughter, your mother told me you had died, but I dream you're alive. If you ever read this, look for the mark on your left shoulder. The one that looks like a star, it's the sign of our family. It's proof of who you are. I have the mark, I always had it. My mother told me it was an ugly birthmark. She never let me show it. Now I show it. Now I travel to Lagos. Now I find my father, 78 years old, blind, still looking for daughter who died 35 years ago. And when we meet, we don't talk about my mother. We talk about Nia. About who she was, about who I am, about who I choose to be, with my skin healing, with my true name, with my star mark visible for everyone. I grew up in a house where race was a problem to be solved. My mother, Claudia, was the daughter of European immigrants who had arrived in Argentina with nothing and built a life based on the careful performance of whiteness. They learned the language, they changed their names, they married within the acceptable community, and they taught their children that darkness was danger, that African origin was poverty, that the only path to success was through the erasure of anything that might mark you as other. Claudia learned these lessons well. She was beautiful, in a European way, with light skin and light eyes and light hair that she maintained with the same precision she applied to everything. She was ambitious, in a European way, seeking opportunities that would elevate her status, that would confirm her belonging, that would distance her from the immigrant poverty that her parents had escaped. She was afraid, in a way she never acknowledged, of anything that might connect her to the darkness that her family had fled. She met Chidi Akafur at a conference in Nigeria. She was 25, attending as part of a development program that was supposed to demonstrate European engagement with African progress. He was 30, a professor of literature at the University of Lagos, invited to speak about post-colonial theory, about the ways that language carried power, about the stories that were told and the stories that were suppressed. Their meeting was accidental, or seemed accidental. Claudia had gotten lost in the university campus, wandering through corridors that all looked the same, searching for the conference room where she was supposed to present. Chidi found her confused, frustrated, on the verge of tears that she was trying to suppress. He offered to guide her. They walked together, through the heat and the dust and the sounds of a city that Claudia found overwhelming, that she had already decided was primitive, that she would later describe to her friends as an experience that had broadened her perspective. But something happened during that walk. Chidi spoke about literature, about stories, about the way that words could create worlds or destroy them. He spoke with passion, with intelligence, with a warmth that Claudia had never encountered in the European men she knew, who were careful, controlled, afraid of showing too much. He made her laugh, which was rare. He made her think, which was rarer. He made her feel seen, which was unprecedented. They spent 3 days together. The conference, with its formal presentations and its careful networking, became background to their conversations, their walks, their meals, their night. Claudia had never been with a dark-skinned man before, had never considered it, had been taught that such relationships were impossible, were degrading, were the kind of thing that happened to other women, women who lacked standards, women who didn't understand the importance of maintaining the boundaries that protected their status. But Chidi was different, or Claudia was different with him, or the heat and the strangeness and the temporary freedom of being far from everything she knew allowed her to be someone else, someone who didn't perform whiteness with the same desperation, who could imagine a different life, a different story, a different self. When she returned to Europe, she discovered she was pregnant. The panic was immediate, overwhelming, consuming. She couldn't tell her family, couldn't tell her colleagues, couldn't imagine the life that would be possible with a dark-skinned child in a world that she had spent her entire life learning to navigate through the performance of whiteness. She wrote to Chitty, a brief letter, cold, final, saying that the relationship had been a mistake, that she was returning to her life, that there was nothing between them that could continue. She didn't mention the pregnancy, didn't give him the chance to respond to demand, to offer the marriage and the family that he would have wanted. She carried the pregnancy alone, hidden beneath loose clothing, explained as weight gain, as stress, as the normal fluctuations of a woman's body. She gave birth in a private clinic, with a doctor who accepted cash and asked no questions, who delivered the baby and handed her over without registration, without documentation, without the official record that would have connected her to the child she was trying to erase. The baby was dark, darker than Claudia had expected, darker than she could explain, darker than she could accept. She held the child for a moment, feeling the weight, the warmth, the reality of what she had created, and then she made her decision. She named her Nia, a name that Chitty had whispered during the pregnancy when they had imagined a future together, when they had discussed names that would connect their child to both heritages. Nia. Purpose. A name that Claudia immediately regretted, that sounded too African, that revealed too much, that would require explanation every time it was spoken. She changed everything. She created a new birth certificate with a new name, a new father, a new history. Nia Akafer became Amara Blanco. The father became unknown. The place of birth became local. The African origin became a pigmentation problem that would be treated, managed, eventually erased. The cream began when I was 8. I had started asking questions, noticing differences, pointing out that my skin was darker than Claudia's, darker than my classmates, darker than the people in the photographs she showed me of our family. I asked about my father, about why I didn't have one, about why I looked different from everyone else. Claudia responded with medicine. A special cream for pigmentation problems, prescribed by a specialist who didn't exist, purchased through channels that Claudia never explained, applied twice daily with religious precision. She created a ritual around it. Morning and evening after washing, before dressing. The cream was in a plain jar with a handwritten label, stored in a special cabinet that was locked when not in use. The cream burned at first. A sharp, stinging sensation that made me cry, that made me want to wash it off, that made me resist the application. Claudia was firm. It has to burn to work, she said. The spots are deep, the treatment is strong, you have to be brave. I learned to be brave. To suppress the tears, to accept the burning, to associate pain with progress. The cream itched, then it peeled, revealing skin that was lighter beneath, pinker, thinner, more vulnerable. Claudia praised the results. See, the spots are fading, your skin is healing, you're becoming more beautiful. I believed her. I was 8, 9, 10, 11. I believed that my skin was damaged, that the treatment was necessary, that the discomfort was the price of beauty, of acceptability, of the love that seemed conditional on my appearance. I learned to apply the cream myself, to monitor my progress, to feel satisfaction when my skin lightened and anxiety when it darkened, when I spent too much time in the sun, when I forgot the cream, when the spots seemed to return. At 12, I asked about my father again. Claudia said he was gone, that he had left us, that he didn't want to be a father. She showed me no photographs, no letters, no evidence of his existence. She told me that I should forget him, that he was not important, that we were our own family, complete, sufficient. I accepted this as I accepted the cream, as I accepted the name that didn't feel like mine but was the only name I had. I continued the treatment, the burning, the peeling, the gradual transformation of my skin from dark to light, from African to European, from Nia to Amara. At 15, I asked about my grandparents. Claudia said they were dead, that there was no family beyond us, that we were alone in the world. I accepted this too, though I felt a loneliness that her presence couldn't fill, an absence that her explanations couldn't explain. I looked in mirrors and saw someone who was becoming more acceptable, more beautiful, more like the people in the photographs, but less like myself, less like anyone I could recognize as real. At 18, I left for university. I studied law, specializing in human rights, drawn to questions of discrimination and identity that I couldn't name as personal but felt as urgent. I was drawn to cases of racial injustice, of colonial legacy, of the ways that systems erased people like me, though I didn't yet understand that I was one of those people, that my erasure was literal, physical, chemical, ongoing. I built a life, a career, a network of friends and colleagues who knew me as Amara, who saw my lightened skin as Olive, who accepted my European name without question. I dated men who were white, who were acceptable, who didn't ask about my origin because I didn't reveal it, because I had learned to perform the identity that Claudia had created, to be the person that the cream and the name had made possible. But I was always careful, always aware, always managing my appearance, my exposure, my truth. I avoided the sun, which darkened my skin and required more cream. I avoided swimming, which would reveal the patches where the treatment was uneven, where my original color showed through, where the lie was visible. I avoided intimacy that required vulnerability, that might lead to questions, to discovery, to the exposure of what I had been and what I had become. At 25, I met a man who seemed different, who asked questions that others didn't, who noticed things that others missed, who seemed to see through my performance to something beneath. I was drawn to him, afraid of him, careful with him in ways that I had never been careful with others. He asked about my family, about my childhood, about the photographs that I didn't show, the stories that I didn't tell. I deflected, I distracted, I performed the normalcy that I had perfected. But he persisted, gently, with a patience that was either love or suspicion, that I couldn't distinguish and couldn't resist. We broke up eventually because I couldn't maintain the performance, because the effort of hiding was exhausting, because I couldn't imagine revealing the truth and couldn't continue the lie. He was confused, hurt, angry in ways that I couldn't explain. I told myself it was for the best, that no one could love the real me, that the acceptable version was the only version that could be loved. At 28, I traveled to Senegal for work. A conference on women's rights, a presentation on legal frameworks for discrimination, a professional engagement that should have been routine. But my skin, damaged by decades of illegal cream, began to react to the African sun in ways it never had in Europe. A spot appeared, then another, then a patch that didn't heal, that grew, that threatened to become something serious. I tried to treat it with the cream, applying it more frequently, believing that the problem was insufficient treatment rather than the treatment itself. But the spot grew. The patch spread. The skin around it became inflamed, painful, wrong in ways that I couldn't ignore, that interfered with my work. That required medical attention. I saw a dermatologist, Dr. Fatima Diallo, a woman my mother's age, with dark skin and kind eyes and the professional authority of someone who had seen everything, who could not be surprised, who had practiced medicine in conditions that made my European experience seem luxurious. She examined my skin with careful attention, with the thoroughness of a professional who recognized something beyond the immediate complaint. She asked about my history, my treatments, my products. She noted the patches, the thinning, the discoloration, the texture that was wrong in ways that were familiar to her, that she had seen before, that she knew. I described the cream, the pigmentation problem, the years of application, the burning and the peeling and the gradual lightening that I had been taught to see as healing. She was silent for a long moment. Her expression changed from professional neutrality to something else, something that was recognition, that was horror, that was the struggle to find words that would deliver news that would destroy a life constructed on lies. "This is not spot cream," she said. Her voice was gentle but firm, the voice of someone delivering news that would change everything, that could not be softened, that required clarity despite its cruelty. "This is hydroquinone, at concentrations that are illegal in most countries, mixed with corticosteroids and mercury, compounds that are banned because they cause permanent damage." I didn't understand, not immediately. The words were too large, too fundamental, too destructive of everything I had built to survive. I asked her to repeat, to explain, to tell me what this meant, to translate her medical language into something I could comprehend. She explained. "The hydroquinone destroys melanin, the pigment that gives skin its color. It works by killing the cells that produce pigment, cells that do not regenerate, that are destroyed permanently by the treatment. The corticosteroids thin the skin, making it vulnerable to damage, to cancer, to infection, to the sun that I had been avoiding for decades. The mercury accumulates in the body, causing neurological damage, kidney failure, death. The combination, applied over years, was not treatment. It was poisoning. It was deliberate, systematic, sustained destruction of my natural skin, my natural color, my natural identity. Who gave you this?" she asked. "Who applied this to you?" "My mother," I answered. The word came out automatically without thought because the truth was too large to be managed, too fundamental to be hidden. She said it was for spots. She said everyone in the family used it. She said it was making me beautiful. Dr. Diallo closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet, with tears that she was trying to control, that she couldn't fully suppress. She took my hand, the hand that had applied the cream for years, that had participated in my own destruction. Your mother lied to you, she said. She poisoned you. She destroyed your skin, your health, your identity. This was not love. This was not treatment. This was the systematic erasure of who you are, of where you come from, of the color that connects you to your heritage. I sat in her office for an hour after she finished explaining. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't process the information that was transforming everything I knew about myself, my family, my history. I looked at my hands, at the skin that was lighter than it should be, thinner than it should be, damaged in ways that were now visible, that had always been visible to anyone who knew what to look for. I returned to Europe. I didn't confront Claudia immediately. I needed time to process, to verify, to build the case that I would present, to gather the evidence that would prove what I now knew but couldn't fully believe. I found a laboratory that could analyze the cream. I took a sample from the jar that Claudia still kept in her locked cabinet, that she still applied to me when I visited, that she still insisted was necessary for my maintenance. The analysis confirmed what Dr. Diallo had said. Hydroquinone at 40%, corticosteroids, mercury. Illegal, poisonous, destructive. I found the original birth certificate, hidden in a safe deposit box that Claudia had forgotten I could access, that she had used for documents she didn't want me to see. Nia Okafor, born in Lagos, Nigeria. Father, Chidi Okafor, mother, Claudia Blanco. A document that proved my origin, my name, my connection to a heritage that had been denied. I found the photograph. Chidi, young, smiling, holding a baby that was me. On the back, in Claudia's handwriting, Nia, 3 months before everything. The everything was the transformation, the erasure, the lie that had become my life. I found the letters. Dozens of them hidden in a box in the attic, never sent, never answered. Chidi writing to Claudia, pleading, demanding, asking about his daughter. Letters that began with hope, that continued with desperation, that ended with the resignation of a man who had been told his daughter was dead but couldn't fully believe it. Nia, my daughter, one letter read. Your mother tells me you died, but I dream you are alive. I see you in my dreams, growing, becoming. I know this is foolish that a dead child cannot grow, but I cannot stop hoping. I cannot stop searching. If you ever read this, look for the mark on your left shoulder, the one that looks like a star. It's the sign of our family. It's proof of who you are. I read the letters for hours, sitting in the attic, surrounded by dust and the evidence of my mother's deception. I felt the weight of decades of lies, of a life built on erasure, of the identity that had been imposed and the identity that had been denied. I confronted Claudia with everything. The cream analysis, the birth certificate, the photograph, the letters. I spread them on the table where we had eaten breakfast for years, where she had applied the cream to my face, where she had told me I was becoming beautiful. She didn't deny. She didn't apologize. She justified. I saved you, she said. Her voice was the same voice that had praised my lightening skin, that had encouraged my treatment, that had constructed the lie that I had believed. With your skin and your name, you would have been a dark woman from the street. Now you're a professional, acceptable, you have opportunities that Nia Okafor would never have had. You should thank me. I didn't thank her. I didn't forgive her. I left, cutting contact, beginning the long process of medical treatment to stop the damage, to heal what could be healed, to accept the skin I had now as mine, not as imposition, not as damage, but as the result of a history that was being reclaimed. The medical treatment was extensive, expensive, exhausting. I found specialists who understood the damage, who had treated similar cases, who knew that the skin could not be fully restored but could be stabilized, that the mercury could be slowly removed, that the cancer risk could be monitored and managed. I learned to live with my skin as it was. Not dark, not light, but something in between, something damaged, something mine. I stopped hiding, stopped avoiding the sun, stopped performing the whiteness that Claudia had demanded. I wore short sleeves, showed my shoulders, revealed the mark that she had called ugly. Claudia died 2 years later. Cancer, aggressive, quick. I didn't go to the funeral. I couldn't perform the grief that was expected, couldn't maintain the fiction that she had been a good mother, couldn't pretend that her death was a loss rather than a liberation. But I went to her post office box. She had maintained it for decades, a separate address for personal correspondence, which I had always assumed was for bills, for subscriptions, for the mundane administrative details of her life. I found the key in her papers, opened the box, discovered what she had hidden. More letters. 40 years of letters, from Chitty, from Nigeria, written in English, in Igbo, in the mixture of languages that was his natural expression. Letters that began with hope, that continued with desperation, that ended with the resignation of a man who had been told his daughter was dead but couldn't fully believe it. Nia, my daughter, the first letter began. Your mother tells me you died. But I dream you are alive. I see you in my dreams, growing, becoming. I know this is foolish, that a dead child cannot grow, but I cannot stop hoping. I cannot stop searching. If you ever read this, look for the mark on your left shoulder, the one that looks like a star. It's the sign of our family. It's proof of who you are. I read the letters for hours, sitting in the post office, oblivious to the passage of time, to the people around me, to everything except the voice of a man who had never stopped looking for me, who had written for decades to a daughter who never received his words, who had maintained hope against evidence, against reason, against the lies that Claudia had told. I looked at my shoulder. The mark was there, had always been there, a star-shaped patch of darker pigment that Claudia had called an ugly birthmark that she had covered with clothing that she had taught me to hide. I had never shown it, never questioned it, never understood that it was connection, was identity, was proof. I traveled to Lagos. Not immediately. I needed time to prepare, to contact Chitty's family, to arrange a meeting that would not overwhelm him, that would respect his age and his condition, and the decades of waiting that had brought us to this moment. I found him in a small house, in a neighborhood that was poor but proud, surrounded by family who had supported his search, who had maintained hope when he could not, who had preserved my memory in stories and prayers. The house was simple, clean, filled with photographs that I didn't recognize, of people I didn't know, of a life that I had never been part of. He was 78, blind, his eyes clouded with cataracts that could have been treated but weren't, because he had spent his money on the search, on the letters, on the private investigators who had looked for me in Europe, and found nothing because Claudia had hidden me so well. He sat in a chair, waiting, though he didn't know what he was waiting for, had been told that I was coming but couldn't fully believe it, had been disappointed too many times to trust hope. I entered the room. His family had prepared him, had explained who I was, had tried to manage the moment so that it wouldn't overwhelm him. But nothing could prepare either of us for the reality of meeting, of touching, of the physical confirmation that the search was over, that the dream was real, that the daughter who had died was alive. He touched my face. His hands were rough, calloused, the hands of a man who had worked with his hands, who had taught with his hands, who had written hundreds of letters with his hands. He traced my features, my forehead, my cheeks, my chin, the shape of my nose, the texture of my skin. You are Nia, he said, not as a question, as a statement, as recognition. I know I dreamed this face. I dreamed this mark. His hand found my shoulder, the star, the proof. He wept, not with joy but with relief, with the confirmation that the daughter who had died was alive, that the search was over, that the hope had been justified. The meeting was not cinematic. It was awkward, painful, full of silences and partial languages and the weight of decades that couldn't be bridged in a single conversation. We didn't talk about Claudia. We didn't discuss her lies, her crimes, her justifications. We talked about Nia. About who she was, who she might have been, who she could become. I told him about Amara. About the life I had built, the career, the identity that was imposed but had become real, that had relationships and achievements and meaning that couldn't be simply erased. I told him that I couldn't be only Nia, that I was also Amara, that both names represented parts of my history that were true, that were mine, that I refused to deny. He listened. He didn't demand. He didn't expect me to become the daughter he had imagined, the Nigerian girl who would have grown up in Lagos, who would have spoken Igbo, who would have been part of a family and community that I had never known. He accepted who I was, who I had become, who I chose to be. I stayed for 3 weeks. I met family, cousins, aunts, uncles, people who had heard about Nia, who had participated in the search, who had preserved my memory in stories and prayers. I learned about Igbo culture, about Nigerian history, about the heritage that had been denied to me. I didn't become expert, didn't become fluent, didn't become fully integrated. But I became connected in a way that was real, that was chosen, that was mine. I returned to Europe, but I didn't return to Amara's life. I began to build Nia Amara's life, or Amara Nia's, or simply mine, with the skin that was healing, with the name that was chosen, with the mark that was visible. I changed my name legally. Not to Nia, not to Amara, but to both. Nia Amara Blanco. A name that acknowledged both parents, both histories, both the heritage that was stolen and the identity that was imposed. A name that was mine, that I chose, that I claimed. I opened a center, the Mark, for victims of racial whitening, of forced identity change, of the denial of origin that Claudia had practiced, and that was more common than I had known. The center offered medical support for skin damaged by illegal bleaching creams, legal assistance for identity restoration, psychological counseling for the trauma of discovering that your family had tried to erase you. And it offered something more, a space for naming, for speaking the truth about what had been done, for claiming the identity that had been denied, for choosing who to be when the choice had been taken away. A space where people could show their marks, whatever they were, and be recognized, be accepted, be connected. The center grew. People found us, people who had been erased, who had been whitened, who had been renamed, who had been taught to hate their own skin, their own origin, their own heritage. We helped them heal, not to become what they were before because that was impossible, but to become what they chose to be, with the damage and the history and the truth that was theirs. The epilogue came years later. I was giving a conference, not about my personal story, but about the right to identity, about the legal frameworks that protected and failed to protect people like me. In the audience, a young woman raised her hand. She showed her arm where the skin was lighter, thinner, scarred. My mother too, she said. She said it was for spots. I didn't respond with words. I showed my shoulder. The star mark. The young woman smiled. Not a smile of joy, but of recognition, of belonging, of finally, after so long, not being alone. If someone told you that your skin was a problem, that your name was wrong, that your origin was shameful, that you needed to be erased and remade in their image, hear me. You do not need to be erased. You do not need to be remade. The skin you have, whatever its color, whatever its history, is yours. The name you choose, whatever its origin, whatever its meaning, is yours. The identity you claim, whatever its components, whatever its contradictions, is yours. That's my story. If it spoke to you, comment below. If someone tried to erase you and call it love, tell me. I'll read every word. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.